Disney's Mulan is about a woman from China who joins the army disguised as a man in order to defend China from the Hans. It came out in 1998 and got a G rating, but I don't think it would get a G rating if it came out today. The movie opens on the Great Wall of China, and the Hans start climbing it and attack the soldiers. It shows one of them swinging a sword at a soldier, but he misses and ends up cutting the ladder instead. We are then introduced to the main villain, Shan Wu, and he looks just like a vampire, because how else are you going to know that he's the bad guy? So as a response, the Emperor decides to recruit new soldiers for the defense.
One man may be the difference between victory and defeat.
Well, that was a bit of foreshadowing. We are introduced to Mulan in the next scene, and for some reason it has this random scene of the dog running around feeding the chickens, although I'm not sure what purpose this holds. But her father sends her into town to uphold her family honor, and we get this 5-minute musical montage of her getting ready. So she finally goes into town, and she meets a woman called the matchmaker, who's going to test to see if she's ready to be a bride. So, if Mulan's notes on her arm smudges onto the matchmaker's hand and face, why doesn't it smudge anything else? The first 20 minutes or so doesn't really have anything that would increase the rating, except maybe that the matchmaker accidentally sits on hot coals and is lit on fire, but it's pretty much done for a comedic effect. Because of this, Mulan fails her test, and then we get a song about her being sad. After the song, the Emperor's councilman comes into the village and announces that one man from each family has to serve in the army. And in Mulan's family, guess who that is? That night, Mulan makes herself look like a man in order to sneak into the army, and leaves to serve in her father's place. So the ancestors wake up to save her, and we are introduced to Mushu the dragon. And this is where we get the first thing that could increase the rating.
Your great-granddaughter had to be a cross-dresser!
When I was looking up facts for this movie, I found out it almost got a PG rating just because of this joke. Mushu is supposed to wake up this stone dragon, but accidentally kills it instead. So he and the cricket have to go get her. But first, we get a piece of rude humor.
I'm doomed, and all cause Miss Man decides to take a little drag show on the road.
Can you imagine how mad some people would be if they put this line in a movie today? The next time we see the Hans, they found a couple of Imperial scouts, and Shan Yu tells them to deliver a message to the Emperor. But as they're running, it's implied that they kill one of the scouts, but it doesn't show it. It just shows a Hans pulling back his bow, and then it cuts to the next scene. This is where Mushu meets Mulan, and during this conversation, we get another innuendo, where Mushu says he can see through Mulan's armor, and then looks directly at her breasts. So then Mulan goes to the camp. We're then introduced to Yao, Ling, and Chen Po. Mulan accidentally starts a fight, and it shows Yao punching Ling several times, and Ling kind of gets cartoon-like wounds, where his teeth fly off in a comedic way and he gets black eyes. But this fight is pretty brief and isn't too violent. The next day, they start their training for war, and during this montage, Mulan is doing pretty poorly, and Shang tells her that she's not fit for war and to go home. But if this was an option, why was she so worried about her father going to war? He was a general in the army, so he would know how this recruitment procedure works, and would know that if someone couldn't pass training, they would get sent home and not have to go to war. Her father is obviously not in good enough health to get past the training, so he would get sent home. This wouldn't be because of a lack of him trying, It'll just be the simple fact that he isn't physically able to do it because he can barely walk on his own. The only reason Mulan is allowed to stay because that night she proves herself by getting the arrow off of the pole. So then Shan Yu's hawk finds Mulan's doll and brings it to him. Although I'm not sure why she brought a doll with her when she's going into disguise to fight in a war, but I guess they needed him to find them somehow. The next scene, Mulan is taking a bath in a lake, and then the three main guys come in and join her, and then Mushu makes another innuendo.
There are a couple of things I know they're bound to notice.
And it becomes this game of Mulan trying to hide the fact that she's a woman while they are trying to get her to join in games that they're playing in the lake. But since they're all completely naked, you would think that even though she's under the water, it would still be obvious that she was a woman. I mean, the way this water is drawn, it looks like the water would be pretty clear, and it would be fairly obvious. But then Yao sees Mushu and thinks he's a snake, so they get distracted enough that Mulan can get out of the water and leave. A little bit later, Mushu decides to fake a letter in order to send the scouts to the front line of the war, because he feels this is taking too long. So they go and they arrive at a destroyed village, and there's a lot of ruin, and they find the Chinese army, and they're all dead, and it shows dead bodies, but there's really no graphic detail or wounds. So after a slight mourning period, they move on, and Mushu accidentally gives away their position. So the Han start shooting arrows, and Shang gets shot in the shoulder, and then rips it out. But there's no blood throughout this whole thing, and there's no evidence of a wound. This is followed by a scene of a lot of arrows getting shot, while the soldiers run for cover. No one else gets hit, but there's a lot of fire, and one of their carts explodes. And it can be kind of scary for younger viewers, but since this is a kids movie, no one really gets hurt. So in retaliation, the soldiers shoot the cannons at the Hans in the mountaintops, and the cannons explode on them, but it doesn't show any bodies flying off, and all the bodies just kind of disappeared, and there's no way they survived. So it kind of seems like they just disintegrated. Then Mulan shoots a cannon at a mountain in order to cause an avalanche, and Mushu's on it, so I'm just going to assume Mushu is dead now. Well, I guess not. During the avalanche, Mulan, her friends, and her horse get thrown off of the cliff, and they get saved by the most ex machina way possible. And there is no way Shen Po is pulling all these soldiers and all this weight without any effort. Mulan is wounded, and it shows a little bit of blood for just a few seconds. But while she's in the hospital tent, they find out she's a woman, so they leave her behind, and instead of going home, she sees the Hans get out of the snow, so she goes to the capital city in order to stop them. And once she gets to the city, surprise, surprise, the Hans are there, and they take the Emperor captive. In order to rescue the Emperor, Mulan and the main soldiers dress up as women to sneak into the palace, and they fight the Hans that are guarding the door, but it's really not any more violent than any other fight. They end up rescuing the Emperor and getting away. Yeah, let's just leave the sword there. That's a good idea. Mulan is trying to get away from Shan Yu, and after a short chase scene, they end up on the roof of a building. And then Mulan and Mushu just blow Shan Yu up with fireworks. So Mulan goes home a hero and reunites with her family, and it's also implied that her and Shang get together. This movie is definitely one of the hardest G-rated movies out there. There's several fight scenes in it, but during these, even though a lot of the times they have swords, they avoid having them use them, and the few times that they do, they have them miss the person completely. There's a lot of implied violence, like when they're shooting the cannons at the Hans. It shows that they're exploding in the people's vicinity, but it doesn't show any aftermath. Like, it doesn't show them flying off the mountain, or any kind of yells or screams in reaction. The people just disappear after the explosion, and the majority of the aftermath is covered by smoke. In the scene where Shan Yu gets blown up by the fireworks, he just flies into it, and then it cuts to the sky that shows the fireworks going off. So, although there is violence in it, they do a lot in order to disguise it or pull the audience attention away from it. There's also some innuendos and crude humor that I'm surprised they got away with, even by 1990s standards. And I kind of wonder if it got a G rating just because all the other animated Disneys were getting G ratings, and if it was due to Disney having a lot of pull with the MPAA. But I feel like this movie would not get a G rating if it came out now. I think it would most likely get rated PG for action violence, innuendos, and some crude humor. Let me know down in the comments if you think this movie would still get away with a G rating. Also, don't forget to do the YouTube stuff, and you can follow me on Twitter at MovieMortalYT. Thanks for watching.